morning. Let's see here. Let's get the participants coming. There we go. People starting to stream in here. All right. We are excited. This is, I made that post on LinkedIn, whatever, a week or so ago about boring webinar alert, and I know insurance is not a topic that people love to talk about. It's like taxes, but it is super duper important, especially these days, especially with just how many attacks are happening and the ramifications of being hacked and how sophisticated these freaking bad guys are becoming. So looking forward to digging in with this today. Let's go ahead and get going. So let's move to our next slide. So my name is Paul Van Meter. I am the co-founder of ProShop, and I am super excited today to have Rick Rosenberry with us from USI. I met, before you introduce yourself, Rick, I met Rick a few months ago at a couple of different events here in the Northwest and was just immediately struck by how knowledgeable Rick was, how excited he was to provide information and value to the manufacturers that were in these events, and just very giving. So I just thought Rick is the guy that I want to have talking to my audience about insurance. So Rick, please introduce yourself and let's learn more about you and your company.
Yeah, so Rick Rosenberry with USI Insurance. So we're a national agency and brokerage. I specialize in working with manufacturers, specifically those in the defense and aerospace field. But I work with all types of metal products, food manufacturing, and cyber is one of the things that I've been focusing on for the last couple of years. And so I'm excited to share some of the insights that I've found.
Absolutely, awesome. Well, let's dig into this. First, I would like to share our mission statement. And while I'm doing that, as I often do, I'd love for you to, assuming chat is turned on for everybody. Yes, it is. I would love to have you all put in where you are joining from. I know we have people joining from all over the place. So there we go. Heather kicked it off from Bend, Oregon. Beautiful area. Portland, fantastic. Libby, Montana, fantastic. Great. Thank you, folks. We definitely have a community all over the world. So our mission statement here at ProShop is to deliver powerful manufacturing software by deeply understanding our clients' challenges in order to meaningfully improve their businesses and in turn their communities. And understanding challenges in today's environment includes the keeping companies safe. That is definitely a challenge. So Rick, why don't you take it away and share some information with us?
Yeah, so to start off, these are the 10 essential controls that the insurance carriers are going to be looking for. The reason why these are the essential controls is because through past history, these are the areas that have either caused a breach or significantly attributed to the increased size of a breach. Mm-hmm. I put some check marks next to the controls that ProShop actually helps provide. So multi-factor authentication, access control, backups, and then the green check mark is for insurance carriers. So one thing that they often provide is training.
All right, very good.
So looking at a holistic solution. So a lot of times what we see is if they do have an insurance policy, it's sitting in the corner and it's not being used. But how do we take all the resources that you have access to and really look through an organization and find out, the best way to buy cyber? So traditionally, it'll start by evaluating where you're at and then talking with management, talking with IT, your external service providers. And then the carriers will also provide a scan. So this scan looks through all the external ports and everything that a bad actor would see. Mm-hmm. And so we look through these scans and then we move on to, okay, do you have a policy? Are there things in your policy currently that the carrier is providing that you're not taking advantage of. Frequently we see that there's a lot of benefits that the manufacturer could be using. And then we go into broker resources. So vendor contract negotiation. So especially in the aerospace field, liability is passed around, and there's a lot of like, oh no, this person handles liability, this person handles it. And so figuring out where the buck stops and then using tools to figure out how much insurance do you actually need. And then we'll work with your in-house vendors. We have vendors that we also refer to people. ProShop is actually one of the vendors that I often refer, especially when someone is working in a field that's very restricted. There's a lot of controls, and the goal is to get you the best application, to get you the best terms and the best pricing.
So going back to this question about carrier and policy, obviously every shop, every company carries general business insurance. Are you saying that sometimes there might be clauses in those that provide some kind of cyber insurance, or are they basically having to go out and always buy something that's completely kind of standalone or an add-on to their normal business insurance?
So 50,000 in coverage is normally something we'll see as an add-on. And a lot of times the carriers include that just to show people that, hey, this is out there. You know, if you want to look at coverages, you can buy more. There's usually not a lot needed for that 50,000, but usually that coverage is not very substantial as far as what actually is covered. And then 50,000 really only gets you so far if you were to have an incident. So
Got it.
Generally, unless you're in a program like in healthcare, so for manufacturing, there's a separate policy that you're looking at for your cyber insurance.
Okay, interesting.
So looking at what is the price actually made from? So you have the classification. So what are you doing? So manufacturing, and then it also can change depending on what you are manufacturing. If you have direct sales, the sales, your employee count, your security posture, and so what you can show the underwriters that you're doing. And we'll get into that later. And then records, which is something that actually is often misconstrued. Records from a carrier is any one person or any one business and all of the information that you have on that person or business. So a medical record, social security number, driver's license, all of that for one person would just be one record.
Okay, interesting. So that's true. That's true in a manufacturer as well. It's okay. And how does that relate to, sorry, how does that relate to employee count? If it's
So it's not, so you would look at your employees as well, but
okay.
So
in the terms of, so records would be a client. So if you have 100 clients, then you have 100 records. Is that
generally refers to clients? So if you're just business to business, it's a lot easier because you look at all of those clients that you have, and you're not dealing with those clients' personal information of their employees. So it's just your client count. And then if you're,
would it matter how many different part numbers you make, or is it really just the customers? Not, let's say you have 100 customers and you make 10 part numbers for each of them. That's 1,000 part numbers. Does that matter, or is it just the 10? It's just 100 companies.
Nope. Yeah. So the supplier or whoever you're working with, the prime, it's now it's just one company, no matter how much. So if you're doing all of your work through Boeing, you only have one client.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. I'm definitely learning something new here as well.
So how to optimize your renewal. So one of the things is get the application right. And that seems pretty straightforward. But looking at like records, like we said, so there's some things in the application that you may think this is the answer and it seems straightforward, but it's actually something else. So working with a broker to go through the application. One other one that we see really commonly is, do you process credit card or handle credit card transactions? For all of us, that answer is probably going to be no, unless you own a credit card payment company as part of your manufacturing. That answer is no. And the wording is very generic. And in order to really be like, in order to say, okay, no, it's not me, you have to ask for more wording. And once you get down to it, it becomes very clear. So some of these questions, if you don't understand them, or if they seem really generic, there's usually a page description behind that, one sentence question. So I've gone through these enough that I can just tell you, what it means.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not working with somebody that's experienced it, make sure you drill that down. And then turning a no into a yes. So go through the application. There will be questions whether it doesn't apply, or if it's something you don't have yet, you need to answer those no questions with a description. So sometimes what you're doing with your team makes a control not valid, or maybe you have something better. Explaining that will go a long ways to helping you get better rates. Even if it is just a no, I should have that, but I don't. You can say, we're working on this, or putting a little bit of wording in there.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes into explaining the no's. And then looking at an executive summary. So this isn't like home and auto. There's an actual person on the other side that's going to be reading this application. So it's not a robot or an algorithm with most cyber insurance. No, there's still some of those eSurance where they're just popping out numbers. But once you get into the renewal, especially now, there's going to be a real person looking at this. So, talking about, I'm working with ProShop, and they have these special controls. These are some tools that we're using that may be different. Our organization runs this way, and this is how we're better, more controlled. So if you can take a little bit of time, and I can, we help people craft those all the time. Especially when there's losses. So going into loss runs, a history of all the losses that you've had within cyber. Can
you explain what that means, a loss?
Yeah, loss run is a term in the industry where you'll ask the carrier and they'll send you a report that shows all of your losses and kind of what those losses were and the amounts. If you don't have any losses.
Do you mean something that you had to make an insurance claim for something? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you've had a claim, it's going to show up in these.
Okay.
And so you want to explain, you don't just want to send them, the new carrier, the list of losses. You want to explain how these happened, how they're not going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And, in the transactional, sometimes things just get, on autopilot, and you just start sending stuff. This is an area where you do want to take some time and explain, and not just be on autopilot and fill out the application and send it.
Got it. Do you have any just like rough ballpark, like the percentage of savings that a company could see if they really do their renewal or their application well, and they do all these things you're suggesting versus not doing those things? Is it going to be,
So a lot of time, and you can see up to, 80% of reduction in premium by doing the right things. And you can even see up to a 50 or more % reduction in a renewal with the same company if you're, moving forward, especially now. They've been spending years trying to figure out, that all of a sudden they've had all these losses, and the carriers are scrambling, and but now they're not scrambling anymore. They understand where the losses are coming from. So there's been kind of a land grab recently where it's like, hey, this is the last chance to try to get as many people to understand and get cyber insurance. And then this next year is going to be okay, we really need to reinforce controls, and the people who aren't going to get with the program and get these things in place are not going to be insurable, but let's get these people to get these people as clients. Mm-hmm. So even if you just got an insurance policy, a cyber policy, you didn't need some of these controls the next year,
Okay.
chances are you're gonna.
So if someone has had, say, a cyber attack in the past and they had to pay some ransomware, because I certainly know of shops that have had that happen, how much will that affect their, but let's say they've now put in place some better controls to help mitigate that in the future. I imagine that that loss they had in the past will still affect their premiums today, even if they put in more controls, or will it not?
It's going to definitely affect the underwriting process. Where that lands as far as premium, it's going to be from individual carrier to carrier. But that story and showing how you're better, you may be better positioned than somebody who hasn't had any losses, but has less controls. Because the insurance carriers, they had losses, like they had policies that they wrote that they didn't think so they understand that, security is evolving as threats are evolving. So it's definitely not going to put you out of the market if you have a loss. But if you have, and you're just mailing it in, as far as not taking your time on putting together a really good story, then you're throwing money away for sure.
Okay, awesome, great stuff, thank you.
So this comes to the, why should I put all this time into an application, into making sure that I'm getting the best rates? And the reason why is because cyber insurance market is unregulated. So unlike property or auto, there is not really any rules to what coverage needs to be provided. And so a lot of times carriers will just leave things out where, like, hey, we're having some losses in this area, let's get rid of this piece of coverage, and then we can sell the same policy and we can make more money. So it's really only as good as you can negotiate. And so working with, as a national brokerage, we've actually pre-negotiated a lot of coverages to where we're not going to sell you a policy that is missing some of these things that you need on a basic standard. So we work with you, but then from that point, we have a really good baseline, but looking through what an incident may look like, there may be some coverages that we want to make sure that are there that wouldn't be on a regular policy. And maybe some of these bells and whistles that look really attractive may not apply to you. So let's go with this policy because this has the core. So, using that to really find what's a good match for you. And even if you have two competing insurance companies and the policies look similar, and they have the same coverages, those individual coverage lines may be written different. So that's something that we do, is we actually help you, because you can't compare any insurance apples to apples. There's no same fruit in the cyber insurance right now.
So if I'm, and I so the unregulated part of it is basically means that insurance companies can put in whatever coverages they feel like, whatever things they want to skip, not cover, versus, auto insurance is, that they have to provide, uninsured motorists and liability and comprehensive or whatever, all the things.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier. So I imagine it's a lot easier to shop for insurance for your car or your house. You don't really need someone like yourself, but for this sort of Wild West unregulated industry, you really want someone in your corner making sure that you're not missing something, a clause that means that you won't have coverage if something happens. Am I getting that right?
Yes. So being a knowledgeable buyer, this is definitely one of the most critical industries, to make sure you have someone in your corner that can tell you whether or not you're covered for incidents and can help you buy more for your money.
Okay. So I know I have some questions, mulling in my head, and I forgot to say at the very beginning, please put your questions into the Q&A area. We will get to those at the end. I think we're going to have plenty of time Rick is efficient with delivering this information, so we won't be using the full hour. So we'll definitely have time for Q&A. So yeah, as things come up in your mind, don't hesitate to throw those in there, and we will put them in the hot seat at the end. All right, what's next?
So this is kind of an eye chart, but these are a list of all of the areas where you may have losses. So you have privacy liability, the notification, forensic costs. Forensic costs are a large one. The reason why ransomware is so expensive and those claims cost more than other claims is because largely forensics. So you have to have someone go in and see, how they access your system and go through all of these in order to, there's things that are expected of you as a business, as far as reporting, especially if you're subject to CMMC. And we can definitely get into that. But being able to actually look and see who those bad actors were and do your due diligence of trying to figure out what happened, so it doesn't happen again. So there's a lot of these costs. And then on the next page.
So before we jump ahead, on the liability costs, is that for like you get hacked, your customer's data gets exfiltrated out, now it's on the the dark web, and your customer tries to sue you for leaking their information? Is that what that is for?
So the liability costs, so third-party liability, anybody, the liability for anybody that is damaged because of that loss. And it doesn't always have to be super critical information. So if something's taken forcibly from you, it becomes, private information, even if it's something that you may give out at a different time. So it's, some personal information about somebody, you can post it online and then it's not a breach. But if somebody takes that forcibly, then it becomes an issue.
Interesting. Okay. And what is so this is just different types of coverages? Yeah.
So this is something that we would go over. So when you're looking at your incident response plan and when you're looking at your business holistically, we'll go through all of these different coverage lines and see, okay, this is your size business. This is how your business operates, where it trickles down to your different organizations. We'll look at your contracts with your subcontractors as well as with primes to see what liability you're taking on. How can you disperse that throughout your organization? And that's what we use to figure out, how much bricking coverage. So if somebody gets into your system and they damage your computers, your network to where they can't be used anymore, what does that coverage need to look like? How much do you need to replace all of your systems?
Okay. All right. Super interesting. All right, let's jump to the next slide.
So this is what these coverages will look like in the wild. So when you actually have a cyber policy, system failure, reputation harm, invoice manipulation, fines. And then there's also, there'll be a list on your policy of the services that they provide. So employee training, pre-claim assistance. So that's one thing that a lot of policies will provide, where you have a hotline that you can spend a certain amount of time calling and it will, Bill in accounting lost his laptop, and you call them and say, hey, what should I do? And they can help you. So not everything that happens is a claim. So as long as that's encrypted, and then there's some of these coverages, like I said, aren't the same. So ransomware and cyber extortion, you would think that each carrier, that would just be the same coverage. If you have it with one, it's the same with another. But there's a paragraph or a page that explains exactly what that covers. And so the pre-negotiation that we do makes it a lot easier on your side. It'll save some time because we don't have to go through all of these. And that's where having a trusted broker that works in this field helps, because they're not going to let you, buy a policy that has big gaps in it.
Okay, interesting. There's a lot to know. This is this is a lot.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to get too in depth on some of these individual coverage lines, but I do want you to know that these are things that you're going to want to look at, and if you can have a larger, more holistic view of everything, for some companies with lots of employees, an employee training program that's free, that may save them $2,000.
Right.
And so that may be something, maybe in pre-claim assistance, that may save them a bunch in lawyers' fees. So it's not just looking at coverages, but looking at everything that policy will provide for you.
Got it. And these things on the left-hand side, are these line items that could or could not be added to a policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So bricking, I often see that excluded.
So bricking, just to be clear for everyone, bricking is when someone puts in some malware or ransomware and basically freezes up all your devices, all your computers are basically bricks. They're useless anymore and you need to replace them. Is that what that is?
Yep, that is exactly what that is.
Okay. And so some policies do not include that and other policies might.
Yes. And then this doesn't include the exclusion page. So there'll be a whole, probably 10 pages of exclusions on a cyber policy.
Oh, wow.
That you need to read through. And I usually build packages for industries. So we have one for the defense and aerospace industry, so where this is what you're doing, we understand your risks, and we've built policies with the limits that you need. So we can do that in all types of different manufacturing. So it's really tailor fit, but we don't have to go through every single line item because we know 95% of what your organization does without actually having to talk. And
so it sounds like when it's well crafted, the policy, it's okay to have exclusions because you don't actually want to pay for those and you don't really need them based on the type of business you have.
Yeah. So there is there's one exclusion. So if you are working in the defense industrial base and you're making parts, aerospace or defense parts, one exclusion is government intervention. So when a government actually takes control of your systems because of something, the breach that happened, normally for a food manufacturer, for metal parts and components, that's not going to be something that they're going to need. But according to the CMS regulations, you actually have to turn your systems over to the government and make them readily accessible. And so paying for consultants and cost time to actually have that. So that's something that we carve back in for our defense contractors.
Fascinating.
But you wouldn't want to pay for that if you were just making other metal components or plastic.
Not for defense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew, yeah, I am learning all sorts of things today. This is good, although a little scary. All right, what's next here?
So we can just cover this one quickly. Benchmarking limits and your retention. So seeing what your deductible, what you want your deductible to be, looking at options for, there are some deductible free programs where your breach response. So calling somebody or calling the company and saying, hey, I need somebody in forensics to look through my system. I think there may be an issue.
Okay.
Some policies include that without a deductible. And so then you can raise the deductible from, maybe 5,000 to 25,000 and have savings there. Maybe that doesn't make sense for your organization. So really looking at that, raising retention or deductible can be a great way. And then also, not buying too much. And then when you look at, we go to the next slide. Looking at your third-party vendor contracts. So people that are working for you, somebody that's doing your welding or your inspection that you're working with, and you want them to have cyber as well, because you want your supply chain to be resilient. We can figure out, how much insurance should they buy? How much, we don't need to ask for them to have 5 million in limits, but we don't want them to have, a $50,000 add-on.
Right.
So that's something that we can do. And then, looking through all of these relationships and figuring out, is there a place to take some of this liability and pass it on? And so that's part of, a risk strategy. You're passing off risk to the insurance carrier and you're paying a premium for that, but you can also pass that same risk off. And there's at the primes, at these large companies, there are people whose job it is to figure out how to pass off risk. And so having somebody in your corner that, we work with some of these larger organizations, so we can say, hey, this is something that you may want to push back on. That's not applicable to you. If you take on this liability, you're not covered for it. And so you're just going to be left after your cyber insurance has done its thing, you're going to be left holding the bag.
Is cyber insurance a requirement under CMMC, or is it just still an optional thing that?
It's optional. It was considered in the original rulemaking to be a requirement, but they decided that it didn't make sense to require it specifically. And a lot of that is because for different size organizations, different things make sense. Others have different requirements. But one thing I will say about requirements is there's reporting requirements. There's a due diligence that needs to be done. So I don't know of a company, that's making less than 100 million, in sales that has everything in place to take care of a cyber incident. They have the specific lawyers that can walk them through the process. They're reporting and they're doing all of these things that are required. That's a big piece of the policy is you instantly have experts on your side that have done this, and this is what they do every day.
Got it.
And their job is to make losses smaller. So let's say you have two manufacturing organizations, 10 million in sales. Both of them have been planning, one have a policy, one doesn't. The one that doesn't have a policy, they have really great controls. They have been working on doing this for quite a while and they're in a good position. They don't think they'll have a claim. But something does happen, whether it's just an employee that does something wrong. The one with the policy, because they have so much in their corner, they're going to end up with considerably smaller losses than one, because they don't have the processes that a policy can provide.
Sure. Wow, fascinating. Okay, let's move along here.
So another coverage, business interruption and dependent system failure. So not only are you worried about your information and your systems, but let's say you're one of the third-party companies, your managed security provider, they have a hack. They are managing your information and your systems, and you actually are responsible for that. So you want to make sure that you have coverage for interruption of your system. So if they go down and you're relying on them for your day-to-day operations, we can include coverage so you get business income coverage, you get coverage for any liability, third-party liability to other people. So that's something that you're seeing more and more common, but it's definitely not something that's just added on usually into a policy.
So let's say a shop works with a local IT provider and they help them with their computers, they help them with their backup systems, and they are hosting some of their, your data
Mhm.
on their servers, and they get hacked, and your data gets, exfiltrated there instead of in your own facility.
Yeah.
So you're saying, no, wouldn't that IT provider have to have their own policy? Or how does that
So,
relate to if you have coverage for them?
so they don't have to have their own policy. I would recommend checking.
Okay.
But normally, so an IT provider, I know we recommend 5 million, 10 million in limits, a really robust policy that covers their clients. But that policy is meant to protect the IT provider, not their clients. So it's to protect from lawsuits and to protect for the things that that company has to do in the case of a loss. So your policy is to protect you from people that are going to sue you.
Got it.
And that's even if it's a 10 million in limits, they have, what, 100, 200, 300 clients. That's going to get whittled down really, really fast.
Oh, sure.
So it almost, them having coverage for their actual resilience, and they'll be able to do the things they need to get you back up and running faster. But as far as that liability and the loss that you're going to sustain by not having that up and running, is something that you need to cover yourself. So it's still important for them to have insurance, but it's not for you.
Okay. Interesting. All right. CMMC, everyone's favorite acronym.
Yeah. So just like what we talked about for, government intervention coverages, there's a lot of different coverage enhancements that we have built. So a manufacturer working in aerospace or defense, we actually have a package policy that includes several things that you'll want. I haven't seen anybody else doing this. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. But I know this is a pretty niche industry. I'm actually, after this, flying to San Diego at noon for a CMMC conference, staying up to date on everything that is going on. But if you are in a compliance model like this, I would recommend having a cyber policy. It's going to very much outweigh the costs. And we're building in to where you'll actually have a law firm that specializes in CMMC.
Okay.
So they specialize in government compliance, and they'll be on your side as soon as something happens to be able to walk you through this. And they understand the DIB and they understand these regulations because they helped write them. And so definitely make sure that you have a policy. And we're actually working to make the policies cheaper. Because if you are subject to these and you're working towards them, you have great controls and you do have a government that's going to step in and help. For companies that have had losses in the defense industrial base, if they did have their ducks in a row, so they're, they have their SPURS score that's accurate. They are, actually doing what they can. And then they reported properly. As soon as something happened, they escalated it and they went through the proper channels. The Department of Defense actually stepped in and was like, okay, there was a ransomware incident. They're like, we'll take care of this. And they actually bricked the ransomware company.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. And got their data back and ruined all their systems. We're like, we found out who it was. You're good. In that company, because they had their ducks in a row, sustained considerably lower losses, and then the reputation loss. So this isn't just for Department of Defense, but one of the big coverages that you want is reputation coverage. So you'll be assigned a PR specialist that will help you to get the message out there to your channels, because these supply chains that you're working in, it's about, there's trust. There's usually years of working together. And then a lot of this is, especially for the small manufacturers, you're working on, okay, you're nimbler than these companies are. But if you spend 3 months or a month not being able to work, you could really impact where you're
Of
at.
course. Yeah.
But that is one place where, ProShop has been super helpful as far as having offsite backups.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to real resilience, supply chain resilience, having somebody like ProShop that's keeping your data, confidential, as well as having the people on your side with a cyber policy that are going to come in and fight for you as soon as something happens.
Right. So interesting. Wow. So the having the lawyers that'll help you and the PR, is that built into most policies, or is that something that you guys negotiate on behalf of your customers?
So we've negotiated this for the specific industry, but all policies will usually have one of the biggest things they build into it is reputation damage so the lawyer will be able to help you to do these things. And then as far as all the reporting, so you will have a coach and a law firm that's going to help you to do all the reporting that you need to. And so yeah, that's something that's included in most policies. Sometimes there's exclusions.
Okay.
Or there's sublimits.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And GDPR.
Yeah. So if you are working, I'll just cover this briefly. If you're working internationally, if you have clients from Canada or from the EU, it's very important to make sure that this is built into your policy. It's specific coverages to cover your international, the international penalties and different things that can be put against you. So there's a bunch of reporting requirements. Even if you just have one person from the EU's information, there's a lot of reporting requirements that you need to follow, and there'll be fines and penalties and all types of stuff. So this is in a lot of policies, this is just built. You don't have to touch it. You just make sure that this is included, and this will be included if you have a loss. There'll be somebody to help you through these different compliance.
Okay, so if you have a customer in the UK or somewhere in Europe and you get hacked and their data gets compromised, that's when GDPR will start kicking in?
Yeah, so it is, it's coverage for all of the different losses that you would have associated with, their specific privacy regulations. And California is getting to the point where it's fairly similar. And there's different states that are, increasing penalties, and they're increasing the things that you have to do. So providing providing a year of coverage for for the person to be able to see if somebody has hacked them. So
got it. Okay. I just remembered when you're talking about the reporting, and let me just jump back one here.
Yeah.
So we actually had a customer that had a situation like this, and we have a case study of it that they'll put into the chat. So for those on the call here, pull that up on a tab and bookmark that or save it for later. Who are the proper channels to report to? Like, do they just go to you guys first, or the insurance company, and say, hey, we had a hack, and then they tell you who to report to in the government? Or how do people know what to do with that?
So once you have an incident, and at the very beginning, whether you think it's going to turn into a giant incident or not, if you have something happen, usually there'll be a channel within your insurance carrier that you can report. It may not be, okay, this is going to be a breach, but something happened, there was an incident. So you can report that. It doesn't trigger a claim, but you want to have that there. So if it does turn into something, you've reported that on time.
So would an example of an incident be someone clicked on a phishing email and then they realize after they clicked on it, they're like, oh man, that's not legitimate.
Yeah.
But they're not sure what actually happened. They didn't see anything on their computer, but they know they clicked something? Is that the type of thing that they would want to report to the
So
insurance
yeah,
company?
if you think you may have downloaded something,
Mhm.
or if you realize that you put in your password and wait, this isn't the right, landing
Sure.
page
Yeah.
or something like that, you know, you're gonna want to have these processes throughout
Mhm.
your IT team. So smaller companies are probably gonna want to submit that, and then they may call that hotline.
On the insurance company's hotline.
Yeah, so they may call the hotline and say, hey, this happened. Large organizations are going to have a better understanding because they'll have employees that, like a CISO, chief information security officer,
Yep.
that is going to know how to what to handle. But usually as a small organization,
Mhm.
something like that happens, you're going to want to be reporting first. And once you have a policy in place, there's going to be a list of, this is what you need to do.
Okay.
So there's actually instructions built into the policy,
All right.
and you want to take those instructions and make sure that you have it understood within your employees where things need to be escalated, and then at what point does that get reported. So that's something that you can we can workshop with an individual company.
Okay. All right. And this looks like sort of a wrap-up slide for you.
Yeah, I have after this, I have a couple of examples of
Oh, yeah.
losses.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
but
let's
yeah, I
move
mean,
through
that's
those because we are taking more time than I thought we would. So
okay.
um, let's take, people love case studies. So let's talk about this.
Yeah. So this is an example of a customer. It's 25 million in revenue, 120 employees. They were just corresponding. They thought they were talking with the supplier, and somebody got in the middle of that, and they sent fraudulent funds.
Mm,
So it doesn't have to be somebody hacking in.
right.
Somebody, as a joke, people will say hackers don't hack; they log in. So they find your information and they would log in just like you would. So if they get an email or something, or if they get the email of the law firm or the supplier you're working with, that's pretty common.
Wow. Yeah. And I've heard of this happening. It's super deceptive. People don't realize that they're not talking with their vendor and yeah, sending them money.
Invoice manipulation is something that we see excluded on some
Mhm.
policies. So if somebody takes your invoice, changes things around because they're in the middle
Yep.
between um, they're seeing your emails, they can either send those invoices out to your clients without you knowing,
Mhm.
and then have the address changed or have the billing information changed.
So your customer thinks they're paying you, but they're actually sending company to the hacker.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. And what's this one about?
So this is a larger organization, somebody that's actually working for a government agency. So they had government contracts, and one of their environments was encrypted, and then that bad actor stayed in their system long enough to encrypt the other environment. Luckily, they had offsite backups, and those backups hadn't been encrypted, but they actually were able to get their systems back in line, but they lost their contract because of the loss. And so there was loss of income, and eventually that company did end up going under.
Jeez, that's rough.
So
Yeah, even with those offsite backups, they couldn't get back up quick enough to not lose that contract. Or is that why they lost the contract? Because they couldn't perform on the
So
contract while they
we
were
don't
down?
have, I can't share some of the
Okay.
specifics,
Yeah.
but not having the PR in place and not having the right things moving at the right times. So the government understands that, there are people do get breached, and people in the industry understand that, but if you don't handle it properly,
Mhm.
to where people think, oh, okay, this company, they had something happen, but they're reliable. They were above board. They
Yep.
did things and they got back to work right away. Um, if this brings you down for a while, it can really affect your position in the supply chain. And that's what happened to this company. Their position was, affected, and they had all of these losses, and they couldn't sustain it.
That's so hard. All right. Well, thank you, Rick. That was awesome. And now I'm going to take over for a few minutes and just talk about how ProShop can help your companies be more secure and hopefully have lower premiums. So first, just a couple baseline things. For all of our clients that are in the defense industrial base or any kind of aerospace, or that just because they choose to, we can host in the GovCloud, which is a very secure environment with lots of controls. It is designed to be ITAR compliant. ProShop itself has lots of ITAR sort of features and functionality to help make compliance easier. And then, of course, we're working very diligently to make ProShop help our clients become certified more easily and less expensively. And lastly, it is our intention, and we are working on starting to become FedRAMP moderate certified. It turns out that any cloud service provider, a software company that is hosting or maintaining sensitive data, controlled and classified information, things like that, will have to become FedRAMP certified. So good question to ask your providers if that's their intention and if they're working towards that as well. So just a few things that we have put in place over the last couple of years. Very tight controls over password rules. We even have built-in schemes like a CMMC compliant scheme that predefines things like complexity and how often you have to change them and things like that. We definitely do offer multi-factor authentication. Right now, that is exclusively through YubiKeys. So it's a physical hardware key. In fact, I have mine right here. Looks like that. So you have to have it either plugged into or just wave it near a Bluetooth reader or an NFC reader, excuse me. So much more secure than phones, and a lot of shops are going to no cell phones out on the shop floors. So you couldn't have an app for your second factor anyway. So also a lot more controls on audit traceability, lockout functions, privacy and security notices, and then very specific tailored access to certain users for specific functions. You can even have an admin user that normally doesn't log in as an admin. They log in with less credentials, and they can do their daily job. But if they have to do admin type things, that's just an additional sort of access that they have to turn on just for a brief period of time. And then ProShop Safe is a new product that we are launching very soon. We believe it's a pretty revolutionary way to handle file storage and file management. It basically allows very granular control over which users have access to which files and folders in the file system, all through your credentials and authentication of your ProShop login. And it's designed to help you be compliant to the CMMC and ITAR standards for sensitive data storage. So, and I'll show you another slide in a second here, but because it's for the majority of our customers, that would be cloud storage. We do have also the on-prem options, but I'll talk about that more in a second. We believe the cloud storage is considerably more secure. But it only allows file access to each user for the duration of time that they're logged into ProShop. As soon as they log out, all that access is instantly eliminated. So this is a traditional company with an on-site server storing all their drawings and their models and things like that, both physically in paper form and in digital form. They have lots of CUI within their company on lots of devices. Let's say your salesperson or your estimator, right, has a laptop they take home. That CUI is stored on those devices. There's lots of footprint for attacks. someone loses their, their laptop at a coffee shop, or it gets broken into their car, right? That's a potential breach. We believe that it is entirely possible, and we already have clients really doing this, to eliminate any CUI, physical or digital otherwise, within the company and have it stored only in the cloud. And even when you have employees like programmers that are programming, to their CAD models, they are doing that in the working directories within the cloud environment, not on your local network. So as soon as they close out their Mastercam or whatever, that temporary storage that was in the memory of their computer is cleared out, and there was never an actual file stored on their local device. So theoretically, someone could break into your shop, steal all your computers, go, hack through them, and there will be no CUI or no leakage at all. So we believe that is going to make it just considerably easier and less expensive to maintain compliance. So here's an example of two different types of access. So you have a machinist, and they are in a certain what we call a file security group, and they have access to just the drawings and the G-code folder and maybe this folder, so they can see pictures of their setup, but they can't see or look at anything else, versus a project manager that might have complete access to all the folders within a certain client part number because they need to do their jobs. So really limiting the scope of who can see what. And this same access also translates right into the browser experience. So if someone logs into ProShop, they go to a setup page for a part number they're going to be working on, they can pull up the drawing in ProShop. They can see the photos of the setup or the video of how that machine is supposed to be set up right through the browser. But a different employee that isn't supposed to have access to those things, when they log in with their credentials and their two-factor key, they will not see any of those things within the browser experience. So they won't see pictures, they won't see the links, or the links won't work to go to certain folders or images or things like that. So really pretty easy on the shop floor. You don't, and it's only with your ProShop login. So we're very excited about bringing that out. We think that's just going to be super powerful to help customers keep that data locked down. So we have, what, 2 or 3 minutes left here. So a couple of questions. Let's start here. Aside from phishing emails, what are some common vulnerabilities and points of entry for bad actors? Thank you, David. Great question.
So open ports, and that's something that we talked about with the carrier scans. So they'll be able to see if there's any open windows or ways to just sign into your network. So a lot of products that you may buy, they may have a standard login or admin, and those not being changed or closed down can make it to where, hackers don't hack, they log in, and they'll find that they'll log in with the stock information and be able to access your system.
Got it. Okay. And what is the typical cost for like a 20-person manufacturing company that's in the defense space?
Yeah. So, 20-person, you're looking at, 3 to 4 million in sales, possibly. I would say you would be at around $3,000 to $4,000. Maybe
cyber insurance for the year.
Yeah, maybe up to 5,000, depending on your controls and your organization. A lot of clients that I've talked to before we actually got into it, they were like, no, I don't need cyber, because they thought it was going to be, $25,000, $50,000.
Right.
But $3,000 to $4,000 a year. If you're a small business, you can usually use the general rule, $1,000 per million in sales.
Okay.
That seems to fit. And I would say that would just be, you're an average company with average controls. If you're, working through CMMC and you have some really great controls and you can show that, you're going to see lower. And then if you, if you just have a bunch of old systems, you may not get coverage, or you may be paying considerably more.
Okay. It is the top of the hour. We have a few more questions. I'd love to. Are you okay for a few more minutes, Rick?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll stick around. Obviously, the recording of this will come out if you need to jump off to another meeting. Thank you for joining us, those that couldn't stay. So another question here, are there any special considerations if you have employees work remotely?
So yes. So one of the things as far as remote access is going to be something that you're going to need to look into as far as having those proper controls in place. If you're working in the cloud, that makes things a lot easier. But having a VPN is something that would be important, especially if you're working, traveling or working from home. So there's some things you want to have in place, but it's very doable.
Okay. And then Megan asks, what if someone has added coverage in a package policy versus a standalone policy?
So in manufacturing, a lot of times we see the coverages that are included in a package to be very limited.
Okay.
So they've either taken, okay, this is where we're having all our losses. Let's just get rid of this or limit this piece of coverage, and then we'll be able to, compete with the people who are specializing in that field. So
you may feel like you're covered, but you're not actually covered for the most likely scenarios.
Yes. So you have bars on the windows and everything is great, but the front door's open.
Got it. Okay. And then a question here for me, is ProShop's file storage encrypted? And yes, with ProShop Safe, it's encrypted in transit and at rest, and the backups are encrypted as well. So
those are three questions you're going to see on an application. So
okay. Great.
Almost exactly like that, where your files are they encrypted, at rest, in transit.
Right. And then last question, I think before we'll wrap it up, what is the best way to do employee training, since that's the most common way people come in?
Yeah, so a lot of the carriers, almost everyone that I work with provides free employee training. So for you and for all of your employees at no additional cost. So that's one thing to look at. And I just want to end with, I know there's a lot of some doom and gloom with some of the things they're presenting, but it's affordable. We're actually seeing these giant catastrophic losses be consistently less because people have people in their corner. And so, it's a thing you want to be resilient, but if you have things in place, I think, you're going to have a great 2023, 2024.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so much. I know I definitely learned a ton. I'm sure others did as well. Just appreciate your enthusiasm for helping our manufacturers stay safe.
Awesome. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I put a link in the chat, but if you type Rick Rosenberry, it's me and a dog groomer.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I'm sure you took away some valuable stuff. If you want to reach out to Rick, connect with him on LinkedIn. Here's his information. Obviously, you know how to reach us. And it sounds, Rick, like if you're going to get insurance, it's a really prudent thing to go through someone like yourselves to really make sure you're getting what you need and not getting what you don't need.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today, and have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your month. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.